The skies over Kavaris burned with a soft, poisonous violet, the kind of color that made Dax's eyes water behind his visor. What little atmosphere remained carried the scent of scorched stone and ancient incense, stirred by winds that whispered through hollow archways and broken towers. Once these halls had echoed with music and the gentle brush of silk against polished marble. Now, they lay silent and suffocating, a mausoleum of opulence. And somewhere in this tomb, something had survived. Dax moved slowly, careful not to disturb the thick blanket of dust that clung to every surface like a shroud. His boots left footprints that would likely be swept away by the wind before nightfall. He kept one hand near his sidearm, more from habit than expectation. This wasn't his first ruined world, but it felt different. According to the mission packet, if it could even be called that, this sector was long abandoned. The fall of the Keveran Dominion had been swift and brutal. First the outer colonies rebelled, then the core systems collapsed under their own weight. No formal resistance, no last stand, just silence. Intelligence claimed the nobles had fled weeks ago, and yet there had been a signal. Weak, unintelligible, organic. He'd asked command for clarity. They'd offered none, so they sent him, alone, as usual. Dax adjusted the pack on his back, exhaling sharply through his teeth as he stepped beneath the crumbling arch of what had once been a pleasure palace, possibly the most ornate on the planet. He could still see the bones of its splendor, glass mosaics shattered into stardust on the floor, velvet drapes sagging like tired spirits, murals of long-dead deities peeling from the domed ceilings. Every inch screamed excess. But beneath it all, something darker lingered. This place hadn't just been a home for the elite. It had been a stage, a gilded cage. And then he saw her. At the center of the hall, kneeling upon the broken marble like a ghost carved in blue fire, was a woman. She didn't move. Not even as he approached, steps loud in the silence. Her back was straight, her body folded with precise grace, palms resting upward on her thighs, head bowed so low her long black hair pooled on the dusty floor like an ink spill. She wore layers of ceremonial fabric, their once lustrous sheen dulled by time, the folds arranged meticulously despite the ruin around her. It wasn't her stillness that unsettled him. It was the tension coiled beneath it, like a wire stretched to the point of breaking. Then she spoke. "Please." Her voice trembled, laced with an accent that made the words feel foreign even though they were in common. "Let me serve you." Dax halted mid-step. She hadn't looked up. She wasn't trying to negotiate or beg for her life. She wasn't even reacting to his presence like a person encountering another person. She was reciting, performing, kneeling in prayer to a god she didn't know. He raised his hands slowly, stepping into the light that filtered down through a cracked dome above them. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." Still, she didn't move. Only her breathing shifted, shallow, uncertain. Dax crouched, removing his helmet with a quiet hiss. He set it aside, letting her see his face. Human, weather-worn, tired. "I'm not your master," he said. At that she flinched, just slightly, a shiver down her spine. Her head tilted upward, just enough for him to see her eyes. They were silver, luminous, but wide with something beyond fear, conditioned terror, so deeply ingrained it had no name. Her gaze darted to his face, then to his hands, then immediately down again. "You're not Keveran," she said, voice barely audible. "Number, I'm from Earth," he said. "My name is Dax." She swallowed hard. Her shoulders trembled, and for a second she looked like she might collapse entirely. But she didn't. "You came," she whispered. "I thought they had abandoned me forever." "I don't know who they are," Dax said carefully, "but I'm here now, and you're not alone anymore." That made her flinch again. He set his pack down, unzipping it with deliberate slowness. He took out a heat blanket, some purified water, and a soft-wrapped ration bar. She didn't move. He placed them beside her on the floor. "These are for you. You don't owe me anything." She stared at the offerings as if they might explode. Finally, with trembling hands, she reached for the water. She lifted it with both palms, offering it to him. Dax blinked. "Number, it's for you. Please." Confusion flickered across her face. She looked down at the flask again, then slowly, hesitantly, lifted it to her lips. Her first sip was barely a drop, then another. Her throat worked awkwardly, as if even swallowing had become foreign. Then she choked, just slightly, and pulled the bottle away. Her shoulders shook. A strange sound escaped her lips. Dax realized she was crying, not sobbing. Her training likely didn't allow it. But tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. She hadn't expected kindness, not even water without strings. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you being gentle?" "Because you're a person," Dax said, "not a thing." She stared at him, stunned, and for the first time he saw something flicker behind the layers of conditioning, something like a question. He sat across from her, careful to leave space. "What's your name?" Her lips parted, her voice faltered. "Scylla," she frowned. I think. That is what they called me. I don't know if it's truly mine." He nodded slowly. "Then let's start there." They sat in silence. Dust danced through the light between them. "Why are you alone in this place, Scylla?" Her eyes dropped. The nobles fled. The guards turned on each other. I hid. I waited. For someone to come back? For a master, she whispered. I thought I had no worth without one. Dax inhaled, steadying himself. He wanted to reach out, to say something that would erase those words, but he couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he asked softly, "Were you born here?" Number I was grown, trained, conditioned. She said the words without emotion, like reading from a manual. I was taught to serve, to please, to obey without hesitation. Did they ever let you choose anything? Scylla blinked. That, more than anything, seemed to confuse her. Choice was dangerous, rebellious, wrong. And that, Dax thought, was the true scar. She was breathing freer now, but she kept glancing at him, unsure whether she'd broken a rule that might earn her punishment. He leaned back, legs stretched out, one arm propping him up. She stared. You're not sitting properly, she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? A male, especially one of rank, should sit with form, authority. That posture is relaxed, informal. And that's bad? She hesitated. It would have been offensive. Dax smiled faintly. Then I'll offend you with comfort. She stared at him. Then slowly, ever so slightly, the corner of her lips curled. Not quite a smile, but close. And it felt like the most important thing he'd seen all day. As night deepened over Kavaris, Dax set up camp in a sheltered alcove just beyond the main hall. Scylla curled on the far side of the blanket, as though afraid to share too much space. He didn't argue. Let her choose the distance. Let her learn what safety felt like. Just as his eyelids began to drift shut, he heard her voice, soft and unsure. Thank you for not touching me without asking. He turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes in the dim glow of the lamp. You never need to be afraid of me, Scylla. Not now, not ever. She didn't answer, but she closed her eyes, exhaled, and slept. And Dax lay awake a little longer, staring at the stars above the broken dome, wondering why Command had really sent him here. Something wasn't right. And the woman beside him, this fragile, beautiful being sculpted by a dead empire, might be the key to unraveling it. He didn't know if he could save her, but he would not leave her behind. Dawn broke gently over the shattered skyline of Kavaris, casting a golden blush over ruins that had forgotten what morning looked like. Light trickled through the cracks in the dome above, catching on floating dust and fractured glass like falling stars. For a moment, the palace didn't look like a grave. It looked like a cathedral, silent, aching, and sacred. Dax woke before the light touched his face. Old habits. He opened his eyes, letting his senses settle before moving. The quiet was still absolute. No movement, no voices, just the steady breath of the wind slipping through marble bones. He turned his head. Scylla lay curled at the far edge of the heat blanket, her hands tucked beneath her cheek, one bare foot visible beneath the hem of her ceremonial silks. Her long black hair, loosened from its braids in the night, spilled around her like spilled ink. Even in sleep, her posture held traces of constraint, knees drawn in, shoulders tight, as if resting too openly might bring punishment. He watched her for a moment longer, wondering again how long she'd been alone here. Weeks? Months? What kind of mind could endure that silence and still reach for someone instead of hiding from them? She stirred. Her breath caught. Then her eyes fluttered open. Silver, wide, alert in an instant. When she saw him watching, she jolted upright. I'm sorry, she said quickly. Her voice was low, hoarse. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I should have stayed awake. I should have... You're fine, Dax said, sitting up slowly. You needed rest. That's allowed. She blinked, confused. Her lips parted as if to argue, then pressed shut again. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. He passed her a warm ration pack from his satchel. She took it with both hands again, bowing her head slightly. He didn't stop her this time. Not yet. Sayla peeled back the wrapper with practiced grace, though she clearly didn't recognize what was inside. She sniffed at the contents, a blend of protein, grain, and mildly spiced vegetables, before glancing at him for approval. "It's food," Dax said with a soft smile. "Not the palace kind, but it'll keep you on your feet." She nodded and took a cautious bite. He watched the way her shoulders eased with the first taste. Not pleasure, not yet, just relief. She was used to hunger. She ate slowly, ritualistically. Every motion was elegant, deliberate, as if she expected each meal to be judged. When she finished, she folded the wrapper neatly and placed it beside her knees. "Thank you," she whispered. Dax took a sip from his canteen, then leaned back against a toppled column. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Sayla nodded, eyes still lowered. "Why did you think I was here to own you?" She looked up at him for real this time. No more glances, just a steady, searching stare. "Because no one comes to this place without wanting something," she said. "And I was left behind, which means I am unclaimed." The word hit harder than it should have. "I don't think people can be claimed," Dax said. "Not where I'm from." She tilted her head slightly. "But you are male. You carry rank. You wear command." "I carry a lot of things," he said, "but I don't carry ownership of anyone." He saw her trying to make sense of it. The math didn't add up in her world. Authority meant control, hierarchy, submission, not kindness. "You didn't want me?" she asked, barely a whisper. "No," Dax said, his voice soft but firm. "I wanted to find out if anyone needed help." She looked away, lips trembling. "I'm not useful without purpose," she said. He shook his head. "You're still breathing. That's purpose enough for now." She sat in silence, not withdrawn but thoughtful. Something shifted in her posture, subtle but real. Less tension in her shoulders. Her fingers uncurled slightly from where they gripped her knees. Outside, a distant rumble echoed through the valley. Not thunder, a shuttle. Dax stood, shielding his eyes and scanning the horizon through a gap in the dome. A transport craft skimmed the skyline, low and slow, not tearing a cord. "Scavengers," he muttered. Sayla stood as well, quick and silent. "I will stay out of sight." "No," Dax said. "You stay with me. I'm not leaving you behind." She blinked, then gave a single nod. They moved through the palace ruins quickly. Dax leading, Sayla close behind, silent as a shadow. He paused occasionally to scan the area, her presence a quiet pulse at his back. When they reached a side chamber with intact walls and a collapsed roof offering clear sky, he motioned for her to duck beside him. From here, they could watch the scavenger shuttle without being seen. It drifted low, scanning with external sensors but not landing. After a few minutes, it veered away, disappearing beyond the hills. Dax sighed. "They're not here for you. They're here for salvage." Sayla was quiet for a long moment. "Do they take people too?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "if they're desperate or cruel." She nodded as if confirming an old fear. "Dax," she said, trying the name on her tongue. "You said I'm not property, but I still feel like one." His chest tightened. "That feeling's not your fault." She looked at her hands. "It's in everything. How I move, how I speak, even my thoughts. I still think about earning your approval, pleasing you. It's like the program is still running." "It'll take time," he said, "and space, and choice." She turned toward him slowly. "Then tell me what I can choose now." Dax considered her. "You can choose to sit next to me, not behind me." She hesitated, then moved, not rushed, not robotic. She crossed the space between them and lowered herself beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Her skin, a soft dusky blue, brushed lightly against his sleeve. He didn't move. She looked out at the broken city. "What happens now?" "We leave," Dax said. "I'll signal a Terran evac. You'll come with me, somewhere safer." "Will I still be yours?" He turned toward her. "No," he said, "but I'll still be beside you." Sayla looked down, silent. Then so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "I don't want to be alone again." He didn't respond with words, just sat with her until the sun rose fully, spilling warmth over the palace that had once caged her. They would leave it behind soon, but not the scars, and not each other. The midday light filtering through Kavaris's atmosphere turned the sky a diluted gold, smudged with violet along the edges, a palette born of pollution and lingering energy storms. From the hill just beyond the ruins of the Pleasure Palace, the horizon looked deceptively peaceful, like a world exhaling after a long scream. But inside Dax, there was no peace yet, only a growing weight in his chest, one he couldn't quite name. The emergency signal beacon blinked steadily behind them, its pulse invisible to the naked eye, but alive in his comm system. The response window was anywhere from 4 to 14 hours. Until then, all they could do was wait, and think, and try not to look too long at the place they'd just walked away from. Sayla sat beside him on the stone outcrop, knees drawn up beneath her flowing silks. The wind tugged at strands of her long black hair, scattering them across her blue cheeks. She didn't brush them back. Her eyes remained locked on the valley below, not because she was afraid, but because she was thinking. That was the part that unnerved him most. The quiet, not the kind bred by fear. This quiet was deeper, reflective, alive. Dax wanted to speak, but didn't want to intrude on it. He wasn't used to silence being this companionable. Then softly, "Is it always like this?" He turned. "What do you mean?" Sayla didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed on the horizon, her voice nearly lost to the wind. "This stillness, this space between people, where no one is commanding anything, where no one is waiting to be told what they are." Dax watched her a moment before replying. "Not always, but it's what I want. It's what I try to live in." She pulled her knees tighter against her chest. "It feels wrong, because it's unfamiliar." She gave a slow nod. "It's like I'm suspended, without gravity." He wanted to touch her, to reassure, but he stayed still. Let her keep that gravity. Let her be the one to reach if and when she wanted. "I don't know who I am when no one's watching," she admitted, "when no one's assigning my worth." "You're not alone in that," he said. "Most people feel that way. We just pretend we don't." This time she did look at him. Her silver eyes shimmered, not from tears but from sunlight. Her expression wasn't blank anymore. It was searching. "I remember something strange," she said. "Before the palace, when I was still in training, they brought in a human, a male, to test our reactions. He didn't speak the same language, but he smiled at me, just a little." She paused. "And I smiled back. I didn't know that was wrong, not until later." Dax's brows furrowed. "What did they do?" "They made me repeat discipline phrases for 3 days, then they cut off my language access for a week. I had no words, not in Kevaran, not in any tongue. I was silent, even in my head." He felt a chill, even in the warm air. "I forgot what my own voice sounded like," she said. "And now I can't stop wondering if the way I speak now is really mine, or just another voice they programmed into me." Dax's hand twitched. He wanted to reach out, offer comfort, but still he waited. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." She turned toward him slowly, visibly bracing herself. "Yesterday when I asked if I could touch you, and you said yes, did you mean it? Or were you just being kind?" He met her eyes without flinching. "I meant it." Her lips parted slightly, not in surprise but something gentler, like disbelief melting under sunlight. "I'd like to do it again," she whispered. "Not because I'm told, but because I want to." Dax nodded once. "Then do." Her hand moved slowly, delicately, like a petal testing the breeze. She brushed her fingers across his wrist first, barely a touch. Then she let her palm settle gently against the back of his hand, feeling the warmth of him, the pulse beneath the skin. She closed her eyes for a breath. "It doesn't feel like I thought it would." "What do you feel?" he asked softly. "Real," she said. "Like I exist in this moment. Not as a statue, not as a function." He turned his palm upward, letting her fingers fall naturally into his. She didn't flinch, didn't draw back. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence between them deepened, but not into distance. It became a thread, thin but real, woven in the open air between two people choosing to share space without demand. Eventually, she looked down at their joined hands and said, "You've seen war." It wasn't a question. Dax inhaled slowly. "Yeah." She didn't ask for details. Instead, she asked, "Did it change you?" He stared at the valley below. "Yes," he said, "in ways I'm still trying to understand. You don't act like someone who kills." "I don't want to be someone who does." She considered that. "Is that why you came here alone? To escape it?" He shook his head. I came because I thought there might be survivors, but part of me didn't think I'd find anyone. Or maybe I didn't want to. Her fingers tightened slightly in his. But you did, she said. You found me. He turned to her, surprised by the strength in her voice. I did, he agreed. A silence followed, different from the others. This one hummed with something unspoken. She was close now. Not physically, but in spirit. He could feel it. Then her voice, soft as a breath. What if I'm not ready to be more than what I was? But I want to be. He swallowed the knot forming in his throat. Then we take it slow, he said. No expectations. No pressure, just steps. Together. She leaned in, her forehead nearly brushing his shoulder. I think I'd like that. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just let her rest there, fragile and strong all at once. In the distance, thunder rolled low, another storm brewing. Maybe atmospheric, maybe something more. But for now, the air held warmth, the ground held stillness, and Sayla held his hand, not because she was told, not because she had to, but because, at last, she wanted to. The dropship arrived in the middle of the night, silent as snowfall. It broke through the thin veil of Keveran atmosphere with a soft hum, its approach visible only by the twin blue thrusters cutting lines through the starfield above. Dax stood at the edge of the ridge, his beacon still pulsing at his feet, eyes tracking the vessel as it descended like a ghost, returning to a grave. Sayla stood behind him. She hadn't asked questions when the message had come through. She hadn't asked if she was allowed to leave, or where they were going, or what came next. But Dax had seen it in her body, the way her fingers trembled at her sides, the way her breath hitched as the shuttle door opened and light spilled across the stone. The real question wasn't whether she wanted to leave, it was whether she believed she could. The door hissed open. Dax turned to her slowly. It's time. Sayla stared past him into the warm glow of the shuttle's interior. It wasn't grand or imposing, just functional, human, practical, a corridor that led somewhere unknown. Am I allowed to walk beside you? She asked. His heart twisted. You never have to ask that again. She took one step forward, then another, but she paused at the edge of the threshold, where cold stone met warm steel. Her breath came faster, eyes darting up to the ceiling of the shuttle, then the walls, then the floor. It's not a cage, Dax said quietly. I know, she replied, almost inaudibly, but part of me still checks for locks. He didn't push. He just stood beside her until she moved on her own, stepping onto the ramp with the hesitant grace of someone crossing into another lifetime. The door sealed behind them, and Kavaris disappeared. The jump to orbit was smooth, uneventful. The shuttle was piloted by a low AI automation system. No crew, no questions, no judgment. Just soft-lit walls, cushioned seats, and a panel of glowing data screens that buzzed faintly under Sayla's silence. She sat curled in the passenger seat across from Dax, her ceremonial silks folded beneath her, hair tied back in a loose braid. She had not spoken since they'd lifted off. She watched the stars through the reinforced viewplate, as if they might collapse under her gaze. Dax didn't press her. Instead, he let the silence work its way into the cabin, allowed it to settle, to stretch and breathe. When the engines went quiet and the stars stabilized, he finally spoke. Have you ever been off-world before? She didn't respond right away. Then slowly, I don't know. He frowned slightly. You don't remember? I remember being moved, she said. Between buildings, between chambers, one transport was dark, cold. I think we left the surface, but I don't know where I was. We weren't told. Dax's voice was low. Did you ever see the sky like this? She turned her head toward him, and for the first time since they left the planet, she smiled. Faint and fleeting, but real. No, she said. And it's terrifying. He chuckled softly. It's also beautiful. Yes, she agreed, like something too big to touch, but not too far to feel. They sat in that moment a while longer, letting the stars wrap around them. Then softly she asked, Will you tell me your story now? Dax looked up, surprised. Sayla met his gaze with something more than curiosity. There was trust there, not just in him, but in her right to ask. He nodded. I grew up on a colony called Arelon, he began. Small outpost, dry, windy. You'd have hated it. Her lips curved again. Probably. My parents were peacekeepers, not soldiers, but protectors, negotiators. They worked for the Terran Accord. I thought they were invincible. He looked down at his hands. They weren't. Sayla tilted her head. What happened? There was a riot, he said. Some local miners revolted against contract conditions. My parents tried to intervene. Keep things civil. A stray blast hit the comm station. The roof collapsed. He stopped. Drew a breath. I was 12. Sayla said nothing, but her body leaned forward slightly. I spent the next 6 years training, he continued. I wanted to be like them. Wanted to help people, but not through weapons, through words. Peacekeeping, I thought, was about listening, about preventing violence. Her eyes didn't leave his. Then came the Al-Usari crisis, a refugee fleet trapped in a demilitarized zone. I was stationed there as liaison. Thought I could talk both sides down. Another pause. I failed. An orbital defense grid activated too early. Thousands died. I was coordinating evac when the main channel cut off. I watched the fleet burn. Sayla's breath caught. I resigned the next day, he said. Never took a command role again, just cleanup work, assessing collapse zones, quiet work, like this. But you didn't run from the fire, she said. He looked at her. What? You stayed. You still go to places no one else wants to, even after everything. He looked away. That doesn't make it right. No, she said, but it makes you real. The word settled in his chest like a stone tossed gently into water, creating ripples where he thought he'd been still. Later, as they approached the orbiting diplomatic cruiser waiting in the shadow of Kavaris's moons, Sayla unfastened her seat strap and stood. Dax watched her walk to the viewport again, barefoot, silent. She looked at the docking ship with open wonder. What happens now? She asked. You'll be given quarters, space, freedom, he said. You'll have your own room, doors you can lock from the inside, clothes that aren't assigned, food you choose. She turned slowly, uncertain. And you? I'll be nearby, but not unless you want me there. She stepped toward him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. I don't want to be alone. You won't be, he promised. Will I be allowed to say no? To anything, he said. Always. She stepped even closer. Then for the first time in my life, she whispered, I think I want to say yes. And she reached out, not as a function, not as a role, but as a person. Her fingers brushed his cheek, tentative but certain. And Dax let her, because this moment wasn't about saving her. It was about watching her save herself. And for the first time in a long, long time, he believed in hope again. The morning after she said yes to herself, not just to him, the world seemed full of sound, not because it had changed, birds still chirped, wind still moved through the trees outside their hillside home, but because she had changed. Something within Sayla had shifted, quietly, irrevocably. The weight of her history hadn't disappeared, but it no longer dictated the rhythm of her breath. She woke before the sun had fully risen. The light filtering through the curtains was pale and shy, barely brushing the walls. Dax still slept, his back half turned toward her, one arm resting where she'd laid her head the night before. She watched him for a while, not out of fear or obligation or even desire, but with the quiet reverence of someone observing a moment they never believed they'd earn. Her feet found the floor without sound. The cold of the tiles didn't startle her. It grounded her. She stepped into the washroom and stared at her reflection in the small mirror over the basin. No veil, no gilded garments, no painted silence on her lips, just her, Sayla. And she whispered her name like a prayer, not to ask permission, but to remember it was hers to speak. That morning, she left a note beside the fruit bowl. I need to walk. I want to see what the world feels like when I'm not holding your hand. I hope you understand. She signed it not with the symbol the palace had assigned her, but with her own name, written in her own unsteady hand. Then she stepped outside, alone. The colony of Alestra had a way of unfolding gently. It didn't scream its life. It lived it, through the distant hum of transport skiffs, the buzz of market stalls, and the laughter of children echoing through layered gardens. It was a world built for survivors, by survivors. People who had chosen not to rebuild what they had lost, but to create something new instead. Sayla walked among them, not unnoticed but not scrutinized. Her skin still shimmered faintly in the sunlight, a soft glacial blue. Her gait was graceful, too graceful, and her posture too precise. She tried to blend in, but the palace never left the bones that easily. The marketplace sat on a wide terrace carved into the hillside. Fabric awnings fluttered overhead, painted with floral patterns and geometric shields. The scent of baked roots, fruit steam, and bio-spiced proteins swirled in the air. Voices overlapped like waves, bartering, joking, storytelling. Sayla hesitated at the edge of it all. This was her test. Could she walk into life, not just witness it from the edge? She stepped forward. The first stall sold hand-stitched scarves. She reached out, brushing her fingers across a pale green one that reminded her of Kevaran spring festivals. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the vendor said, a Terran woman with a weathered smile. Sayla nodded. "It feels alive." "You've got a good eye," the woman said. "That one was made by a former artisan from the Eastern Wards. You'd be surprised how many survivors still have silk in their blood." Sayla smiled politely and moved on. She lingered at a booth selling baked coils stuffed with savory vegetables. The scent made her stomach growl, which startled her. Hunger had always been a punishment in the palace. Here it was simply true. She was reaching for a coin when she heard a voice behind her. "By the stars!" "I know that posture." The voice was low, familiar. Her breath caught. She turned slowly. A tall Kevaran man stood a few feet away, flanked by two others in half-military garb. He wore a crest tattooed on his neck, the royal insignia of the House of Altan, her old house. "You're one of the courtesans," he said. "Palace class level 3 designation. You used to serve in the petal garden. I remember you." His voice wasn't cruel, not exactly, but it held an edge, a memory that framed her as an object. Sayla didn't move, her spine locked. Her hands curled instinctively, fingertips pressing into her palms. "You survived," the man said. "You were left behind, weren't you? And now you walk among them, pretending." He took a step forward. "Tell me, girl, do you still kneel when spoken to?" The air around them felt quiet. Conversations nearby faltered, heads turned. Someone whispered her name, and still she said nothing, because something stronger than rage moved inside her. She did not need to answer. And then, "Back away." The voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Dax." He appeared at her side, calm but immovable, every muscle in his frame poised, his eyes locked on the Kevaran man. "She is not your concern," the man smirked. "So you're the Terran handler. I should have known. Tell me, does she fetch well? Or do you have to leash her?" Dax's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Sayla did. She stepped between them. The crowd fell completely silent. Her voice, when it came, was low but clear. Not loud, not defensive, just undeniable. "I kneel to no one." Her words echoed through the market like a hymn. "And if you think my past makes me less," she said, "then perhaps it is you who are still trapped in the palace." The man stared at her and blinked and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Sayla turned her back on him, slowly, purposefully. The crowd parted as she passed. Dax followed in silence, not beside her, not ahead of her, but behind. For the first time, he was following her. They walked until the market was just a whisper behind them. On a quiet bench overlooking the lower garden terrace, she finally sat. Her shoulders relaxed. Her hands no longer trembled. Dax stood beside her. "I shouldn't have followed you," he said. "But I got your note, and when I didn't hear from you, I worried." She looked up at him. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Not because I needed protection, but because you didn't take control." He sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. "What you did back there," he said softly, "was extraordinary." "I didn't do it to be brave," she said. "I did it because I realized something." "What?" "I was made to perform. Even my silence was performance. But today, when I said nothing, that was mine." He didn't speak, just reached out, lacing their fingers together. "I don't want to survive anymore," she whispered. "I want to live." He squeezed her hand. "Then let's build a life." Together, they sat as the sun dropped behind the curve of the colony horizon, casting gold and fire across the sky. And in that light, neither of them belonged to the past. They belonged only to each other, and to everything still waiting to be written. The rain came softly that evening, more like a hush than a storm. It tapped gently against the wide glass panes of their shared hillside home, misting the world beyond in a pale silver veil. Sayla stood barefoot by the window, her fingers tracing invisible lines across the cool surface, watching how each droplet made its own trail before joining the rest. Inside, the lights were low. Dax moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing tea the way she liked it now, strong, bitter, and laced with crushed blossom leaves. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The silence between them had grown rich, not awkward, full, not heavy. It had been 2 weeks since the market, 2 weeks since she had spoken her truth aloud to strangers. 2 weeks since she had chosen to stop surviving and start living. Each day since had been quieter, but deeper. More about small things, folded laundry, shared meals, laughter over burnt bread, than the grand dramas of her past. And yet tonight, something felt different. Sayla turned away from the window and faced him. "You didn't follow me today," she said. Dax looked up from the mugs. "You didn't leave a note this time. Weren't you worried?" "I was." She tilted her head. "Then why didn't you come?" "Because I trust you," he said simply. Those words landed in her chest like soft thunder, quiet, but changing everything. She crossed the room slowly, her bare feet silent against the floor, and took the cup he offered. The warmth seeped into her fingers. "I walked to the cliff path," she said, "the one with the benches facing the sea. I know the place." "I watched a bird leap off the rocks," she said, "wings wide. It wasn't afraid of falling." "You don't seem afraid of anything anymore." "I'm still afraid," she said, "but I'm no longer ashamed of that fear, and I'm not ruled by it." He nodded. "That's freedom." "No," she said softly, "that's healing." They sat together in the small nook by the fireplace, the rain a quiet rhythm outside. Sayla placed her cup down carefully, then folded her legs beneath her. Her eyes stayed on him. "I've been thinking," she began. Dax waited. "About you, about me, about this." He didn't interrupt. "I used to believe intimacy was something given to those who earned it. That touch was transactional. That affection was a prize." She reached up slowly, pressing her hand gently over her chest. "But this, whatever this is between us, it never felt like a prize. It felt like air, like something that just is." Dax leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "It is." Sayla met his gaze, and this time she didn't look away. "When you offered me that ring," she said, "I wasn't ready. Not because I didn't want you, but because I didn't yet want me." He swallowed. "And now? Now I want everything I was told I couldn't have." She rose onto her knees and crossed the small space between them. "I want to kiss you," she whispered. His breath caught. "Then kiss me." And she did. It wasn't hesitant, but it was gentle, exploratory. Her hands rose to cup his face, fingertips feather-light against his jaw as her lips met his in a slow, deliberate motion. No rush, no fear. Only a quiet hunger that had waited patiently, respectfully, for the moment it could breathe. Dax's hands found her waist, holding her not to claim, but to steady. His mouth moved with hers in rhythm, not leading, not following, but meeting. Her kiss deepened, and with it came a tremor through her body. Not of fear, but release. She had been kissed before, but never like this. Never by someone who waited. Never by someone who didn't ask her to earn it. They parted only slightly, foreheads touching, breath shared in the narrow space between them. "I didn't think I would ever want this," she murmured. "Not truly, not with clarity. But now I do." "You're sure?" Dax asked, his voice barely a breath. She opened her eyes, and they were fire and water at once. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And then they kissed again, this time with all the restraint gone. This kiss wasn't just softness. It was a choice sealed, a promise made in the language of lips and fingers, of closeness and consent. There was nothing scripted, nothing performed, only two people who had been broken in different ways, choosing to build something whole. When they finally drew apart, Sayla's fingers remained tangled in the collar of his shirt. Her lips were parted, her eyes shining with something deeper than desire. "I don't want to be yours," she whispered. "I want to be with you." Dax smiled, not as a man who'd won something, but as one who'd waited and been chosen. "Only if we serve each other," she nodded once. "Then I choose you." And in the small firelit space they shared, the rain still singing outside, Sayla kissed him again, because now she wanted. And what she wanted was him. It had been 3 months since Sayla walked away from her old name, Not abandoned it. No, that would be too simple. She had transformed it, grown into it, let it fill the spaces left behind by silence and submission. And now, when she heard someone call Sayla in the market square, or when Dax said it softly across their dinner table, it didn't sound like a title assigned by another. It sounded like her. Their home on Ilestra had taken shape slowly, organically. Dax hadn't made any assumptions. He hadn't brought in decorators or designers, or even offered suggestions unless asked. He'd simply said, "This space is ours now. Do you want to make it yours?" The first thing she chose was the curtains. They'd walked through a vendor's stall at dusk, hands brushing now and then, the light slanting gold across bolts of fabric strung up like banners. Dax was already moving on to something else when she stopped, transfixed by a roll of cloth dyed in shifting tones, midnight blue with threads of copper and soft pearlescent strands woven like stardust. She reached out and touched it, not because it was allowed, not because she'd been told, but because it called to something in her. Dax had noticed her stillness and turned back. "You like it?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered, fingers still pressed to the fabric, "but I want to try." So they'd taken it home. She'd measured the windows herself, climbing onto a stool with a pen in her teeth and an amused Dax watching from the floor. She didn't let him help, not until she asked him to pass her the clips. And when she hung the first curtain, standing back to see the light spill through the weave she'd chosen, she had whispered under her breath, "I made this space softer." She didn't realize Dax had heard her, but he had, and he never forgot. Now, 3 months later, their home was filled with those small touches. A dark green vase she'd chosen because it reminded her of forest domes she'd only seen in holograms. A rug she had sat on for half an hour at a market before declaring, "It's not beautiful, but it feels grounded." She had learned the shape of freedom through texture and placement, through small decisions that stitched identity into empty corners. Tonight, she stood in the kitchen, barefoot on that rug, lighting a row of candles she had blended herself, scents of thyme, citrus, and something warm she couldn't name. Behind her, Dax was finishing a report at the table, stylus in hand, jacket off, sleeves rolled. A domestic peace lived in the air now, not fragile, not borrowed, earned. "Dinner's almost ready," she said softly, not because she had to announce it, but because she wanted to share it. "Something smells amazing," he murmured without looking up. "I made a stew." He smiled. "Is that what was boiling earlier?" "No," she said, lips twitching. "That was the pot I burned. This one's better." He finally looked at her, eyes warm. "You didn't ask me what I wanted." "I know," she said, raising her chin just slightly. "That was the point." And he laughed, setting down the stylus. She brought the bowl to him, then settled beside him at the table. For a long moment, they didn't speak. They just ate, together. No silence to fill. No performance to maintain. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the last candle flickered lower, they sat on the floor beside the hearth. Dax leaned against the wall, one leg stretched out, the other bent. Sayla sat between his knees, her back resting against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, chin resting on her shoulder. She closed her eyes. "I used to think I didn't have a future," she said quietly. "I used to think I didn't deserve one," he replied. She turned her face slightly, brushing her cheek against his. "We were both wrong." He kissed her temple, slow and deliberate. She shifted in his arms, angling to face him. Their foreheads touched. "You know," she murmured, "the first time I kissed you, I didn't know what love meant. I just knew I wanted to choose you. And now?" She smiled softly. "Now I choose myself. And still I choose you." He kissed her then, not for comfort, not for reassurance, but for celebration. It wasn't a rushed kiss. It wasn't a climactic moment. It was an affirmation of survival, of mutual respect, of quiet, enduring love. Their lips met and moved with slow reverence. Her hands slid to his shoulders. His fingertips brushed the back of her neck. There was no power struggle, no question of permission, just a joining. Two stories rewritten into one. They held each other until the fire burned low, until silence no longer marked emptiness but intimacy. Then, still tangled in each other, Sayla whispered, "I used to live in a palace." He nodded against her skin. "And now I live in a home," she finished. "Because you never asked me to serve. You waited for me to want." He kissed her again, On the cheek this time, then her brow, then finally, gently, her lips. "And I still would," he said. She exhaled. It wasn't a sigh of pain or resignation. It was peace. Epilogue. 1 year later, the classroom was small. A circle of cushions, walls covered in tapestries, soft lights glowing low. Around her sat 6 girls, refugees from scattered worlds, most of them trained the same way she had once been. Silent. Still. Fragile. Sayla stood before them, barefoot, in a loose blue tunic. Her hair was unbraided today. "In this room," she said, "you don't ask for permission to speak." One of the girls raised her hand hesitantly. Sayla smiled. "That was a test. You passed it. You may speak." The girl giggled softly. Another leaned forward. "Are you really from the palace?" "I was," Sayla said. "But now I'm from here." She pointed to her chest. "To me, to my name, to my voice." The door opened behind her, and Dax leaned in, carrying a small thermos and a shy smile. Sayla crossed the room to meet him, took the thermos, kissed his cheek, and turned back to her students. "Now," she said, "who wants to learn how to say no in 20 languages?" Laughter echoed off the walls, and through it, Sayla stood, not as a servant, not as a consort, not even as a symbol, but as a woman who had once knelt and now taught others to rise.